So how are we able to make consistent PRs block after block, meet after meet? So this is a very common question. Like, दाइ अस्ति भर्खरै तपाईले compete गर्नु भएको थिएन, but why another meet already? ओजसको पनि like every single block मा नि we're making big PRs, squat मा, bench press मा, even deadlift मा, अनि you see athletes all across Ox Strength that are making PRs, block after block, week after week they're improving. यस्तोले के हुन्छ, इन्जरी हुँदैन, लाइक अफ सिजन ट्रेनिङ चाहिँदैन, यस्तो खालको क्वेसनहरू आइ नै रहन्छ. अनि त्यो चाहिँ लाइक आई जस्ट वान सिट डाउन हियर एन्ड देन टक अबाउट अ फ्यु थिङ्स हाउ द्याट दिस is possible, and maybe it may help you also to get PRs every single block. There may be so many ways that we could skin the cat, but then last ma gaera, the main thing that really matters to me is how do we build proper training momentum, and how can we continue the proper training momentum is the biggest key when it comes to having success block after block, meet after meet, you know, day by day, week by week, is that how do we drive the momentum forward. So that's the major point. Only when we talk about making progress, sometimes it doesn't have to be necessarily just a 1 rep max. Even if you make a little volume PR, maybe you do a certain weight for 3 reps and now you can do it for 4 or 5, or if you could only do, let's say, 250 for a double, now you can do 3 sets of 3. Overall volume trend, when if it's going up, that's still progress, and that's something that we really need to pay attention to, especially when we're laying out training plans. Ki yo training plan ma चाहिँ कसरी चाहिँ we still make progress भनेर. The first thing that I realized what people do wrong is that they go into some really crazy different things, block after block, week after week, and program after program, coach after coach, and that's definitely not gonna work. Because as a coach, we should have identified a proper trend in most of the training, like कसरी गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ progress drive भइरहन्छ, and then we continue to do the same trend, and that's what we push forward. But at the other end of the spectrum, on some lifts, let's say it's not going up so nicely, यसमा चाहिँ what was the last thing that I worked? So that's pretty much like a baseline, and then we work from there. Is it that we need more muscle for this lift? Is it that we need better technical prowess? Or is it better that we need more volume, more loading? So कसरी चाहिँ adjust गर्ने चाहिँ एउटा consistent pattern मा गयो भने चाहिँ progression layout गर्नु it's much easier rather than, you know, just going randomly. Like, let's say even my squat, if I hop into another program and then suddenly do something completely different that I've never done before, even my squat's not going to be as strong. But then I'm simply just putting what works for me and then doing a little bit more weight every single time. So that's how we're basically able to make really good progress through proper training momentum. So point number 2 is sort of slightly linked with momentum, of course, because it's the most important driving force. Like, हाम्रो training program को momentum राम्रो हुनुपर्छ, and that is injuries and dealing with injuries. So if we're having to deal with injuries every single time during prep, so meet पछिको block, or like block where it doesn't really matter that you progress really well, you're getting injured non-stop, यो हुनु साथै पनि progression halt down significantly huncha. And then injuries, oftentimes what people associate injuries is, of course, it's a big factor that this may happen, but then they oftentimes don't look at the training program rather than trying to focus on fixing the injuries with acute methods such as, you know, foam rolling, or, you know, stretching, or activation. And all of these things are, of course, a valid reason to get over injuries, but you shouldn't be relying on these things every single training, every single squat. You need to, you know, foam roll for 3 hours before squatting, and bench press भन्दा अगाडि shoulder mobility for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, I don't know, कस्तो exerciseहरू गर्छ. So this is also definitely limiting your progress. Now these things are working. This simply means that maybe your technique is not so reliable that you run into overuse issues so many times. But at the same time, it may also mean that you're simply just doing too much work which isn't necessary, or maybe you need higher frequency, or maybe you need lower frequency. So this is also sort of related with the training momentum. So if you're constantly battling injuries every single block, that movement, it definitely means that you're not making optimal progress, and it's really gonna stall your progress block after block, and then your confidence definitely gonna go down, especially after having to face setbacks every single time. So you need to adjust your training accordingly. So yeah, injuries पनि a big part of how injuries त नभनौँ just like nagging painहरू चाहिँ definitely a big part of how we can really stall हाम्रो progress अनि यो इन्जरीसँगै रिलेटेड हुन्छ अनि अफकोर्स ट्रेनिङ मोमेन्टम टेक्निकसँग पनि रिलेटेड हुन्छ कि द्याट वेयर रियली फोकस्ड अन एक्सटर्नल things that would potentially help us become a better lifter while we are forgetting that the main driver is the athlete himself and the coach good programming. That should be the primary focus. And me being an athlete, I bounce off ideas off of my coach how we can potentially make our training system more redundant, more repeatable. चाहिँ मैले कोचलाई आइडियाज बाउन्स अफ गरेर चाहिँ हुने हो rather than trying to focus on buying a new supplement, trying to focus on getting a new pair of knee sleeves. I was just having a conversation with few of my clients as well, and then I was telling them the exact same thing, like, see, I also feel like how you feel. Like मलाई यो knee sleeve भन्दा यो sleeve मनपर्छ, त्यो knee sleeve भन्दा यो sleeve मनपर्छ, but at the end of the day it's me that's squatting, and then whenever I wear any of these knee sleeves, my strength is pretty much the same. Now, I may feel a certain way about certain sleeves, but that doesn't mean that it is the sleeve that's only giving credit to my squat. It's other factors such as programming. I was just talking to a few of my clients because यति धेरै equipment available online. Everyone's really caught up. It does matter, but then not more than, of course, proper programming and gathering up a really good training intensity. These are definitely things that are really valid. I think the fourth one, that makes a lot of sense is that as athletes, we don't overutilize our coach. Even if you look at my roster, the ones that have the most success are the ones that I talk to the most. So कस्तो हुन्छ भने athletesहरू, they look for ideas outside. It's fine to look ideas outside, it's definitely a valid point, but then as long as we're reflecting it back with our coach and making progress and then having to listen to our coach. So if you have a coach, like your biggest resource would be a coach, is to have ideas, bounce it off of him, because like हाम्रो coach or whoever, because we hired them because they're at a slightly higher point in their training career, or they have more experience dealing with clients. They've done the things that we've already done in the past, so they definitely have more ideas to bounce off of. So I think your coach is also a really a big resource. Like I said, the athletes that really have made progress are the ones that I have spoken to a lot, and then those are the guys that also listen to what I have to say, regardless of they like it at the start or not, and then they sort of, we find a good middle balance, and then tend to push the progress forward. So yeah, I think all of these things are really intertwined with each other, because whenever we're training, it's sort of like holistic approach. All of these things should meet at a certain point, and then we move forward. But then if we create a lot of confusion, like के गरिरहेछ नै थाहा छैन भने चाहिँ, that creates a bigger confusion, and then you keep running back the same loop again and again. Even me as a coach, sometimes what I really struggle with some of my athletes and then some of my clients is that they would try something completely random, and then it would mess up the whole training block. And then me as a coach, I have to take the safest approach forward, is to revert back to when was the last time that we were doing really well. Let's say one thing would be switching up too many things. So techniqueहरू गर्दाखेरि पनि, even when we're changing a technique, it should be a decision between the coach and the athlete. So when we change the technique, it isn't everything. So let's say my squat is very quad dominant, right? So I shouldn't be suddenly, opening up my hips really wide and then trying to hinge my squat and then good morning my way back up. That's a really major change. So if I want to eventually get to that point, I have to start to make smaller details, so that I know if this doesn't work, then I revert back to my original and then move forward. So फेरि त्यो भन्दैमा एउटा सेसनमा नचल्न साथै नै इज लाइक ए हैन यो त हुँदै भएन, आई शुडन्ट बी डुइङ इट. सो यस्तो पनि हुन्छ. सो वी मेक चेन्जेस स्मल इनफ द्याट वी क्यान अलवेज रिभर्ट ब्याक टु द ओरिजिनल, but at the same time we also keep the technique for long enough that we know for a fact that it's working or it's not working. So that's something. So it's the exact same thing with equipment as well. So यो knee sleeve आज लगाएँ, भोलि दामी भयो, but What if it was actually a really, really good training momentum, and on that very day you wore a new sleeve, and then sleeve le haina training momentum le training राम्रो भइराछ, but you think it's a sleeve, and then next time is like, hey, haina yo sleeve haina रहेछ, like too much confusion huncha. So it's always best that we double back and then make smaller changes every single time that we really want to make the change. And you look at the biggest thing that's wrong, fix it from there, and then move down the chain, and then not try too many things, because it's a very, very, very simple yet very complicated sport. We just have 3 lifts, we just have to do 1 rep each, so everything revolves around these things, so that धेरै confusion भयो भने it just creates more confusion, and then you can't really drive progress. So it's been pretty much the same for me as well. Like my last couple of years, 1.5 year or so, like my training has been going on an upward trajectory like never before. Even in my early days, I wasn't making progress as fast as what I'm doing right now, because we've figured out the perfect squat technique for me, and then perfect loading methods that we can make, little progression block by block, and I don't really need to change up anything. And then even when I try new sleeves, it's like I give it some time, and then I revert back and forth, and then figure out for myself. Even with bench press, like I found like a really, really good bench press technique for myself, and then proper way to load it. We can always revert back to the original, and then we're making progress. Same thing for the deadlift as well. For deadlift, we're still trying out a few things, and this trying process and the new cues जहिले पनि भइ नै राख्छ के, like अलिअलि सानो changes हुँदैन, but we can always double back to the last thing that worked, and if the last thing that worked is pretty close by, then it means that धेरै time waste हुँदैन. अब सबै random गऱ्यो भने चाहिँ सबै नै random हुन्छ, and then you have a preconceived notion of what is supposed to be heavy, what is supposed to be light. And then I see guys, 5 years back they were squatting 150, and 5 years later they're still squatting 150. 5 years down the line they'll probably still be squatting 150. So यस्तो पनि मैले देखिरहेको हुन्छु obviously. So it's just like accumulation of all of these methods, really being resilient with nutrition, training, consistency. Like these things sound so cliche, but it's so true. Like be super duper consistent, like more than anybody else. Like perfect score चाहियो consistency मा चाहिँ, अनि nutrition मा पनि perfect score, sleep perfect score. Then that's how basically progress is made. And all of the guys that have had success, they have most of these criteria, if not all of them. So yeah, that was the video for today. Short one, but then I think quite informative if you look at it with the holistic approach. So like always, if you want coaching from either one in our group, links are in the description down below, and then we will see you in the next one. Until then, be strong.